Thank you all. This is a good group. I should give these really vague titles more often where nobody knows exactly what I'm going to talk about. It's always tough in this time of year, October, November especially, early November. You never know quite what the garden's going to be doing here. We could have had a really hard freeze and everything's kind of shut down and really going dormant, or a year like this where we're kind of in between and really getting a nice fall, or it could still be pretty much a high summer for us in early November. Just never know. But just about perfect this year. So this is where we're going to talk about some of the great plants in the fall garden. We talk about flowers, fruit, foliage, some stems, maybe even a little bit, but just some of the stuff that's really looking nice out in the garden right now. This is a big group, so. Try and keep up. Some of these spots are kind of narrow, so we'll have to kind of weave on through. Try and stay on the paths as much as possible. There's a lot of dormant things there, and we compact the soil when we get off the paths and step on the plants. So do the best you can. I can talk pretty loud, so I'll try and make sure everybody hears me. I'll make sure everybody knows the plants I'm talking about, and try and stop in areas where we really can talk to everybody. I may point out a plant so everybody can see it, and then move to a spot where everybody can hear me and can gather around. As always, please ask questions, make comments if you have experiences that are different than mine. We'd love to hear that. Everybody gardens a little differently, has different experiences, so I like hearing what other people have to say. I know we have some great gardeners out here. With that, we're going to go ahead and get going, because it's always takes a little longer with a big group. So let's jump right in. Okay, first one on the list is a euonymus. Now, a lot of people, when they hear euonymus, they think of either evergreen shrubs or evergreen ground covers, viney plants, but there are actually a lot of euonymus that are trees. They're deciduous euonymus. There's evergreen ones. So there's a real wide variety of plants in the euonymus group, and they range from North America to Asia mostly. Now this is one, Euonymus carnosus, that I was first introduced to by the Arnold Arboretum. They sent some plants out, and I'd be willing to bet, I didn't check the records, but I'd be willing to bet this one came from that same distribution. I don't think anybody else was growing it. And really, I immediately fell in love with it. It's a pretty quick growing tree, small tree, with these really thick leathery leaves. In warmer climates, it tries to stay evergreen. It'll go deep burgundy in the fall and stay like that through most of the winter. If you have a really good fall like we're having here, you get kind of all these various shades in here, but it'll eventually go burgundy and drop its leaves. In Zone 7 gardens, usually in December, late December, it'll drop its leaves. Mild winters, it'll carry them on into January. It's called the fleshy fruited or fleshy flowered spindle tree, fleshy flowered, but it's got kind of thick fleshy fruits as well. And you can see once the leaves drop, these will really show up. These fruits. They pop open, not quite like some of the other euonymus where you get those really nice, like our native hearts of Burston, that'll go turn bright red and have the orange seeds in there. But it will do that to some extent. But this is one that even looks better when they're closed than some of the other euonymus. Really pretty flat fruiting one. Flowers, nothing to write home about. They're small, kind of greenish white. They're nice, but it's not a dogwood flower or anything like that. You can see it's pretty tough. We've got it growing out in full sun in a little parking lot peninsula. Not an easy place for plants. Pretty tough, but they will grow in relatively deep shade as well. So they're pretty adaptable. We've distributed it a couple times. Got a really good fruit set on it this year. Maybe we need to collect some seed and grow them out and distribute it again, because it is a fantastic small plant. Questions? Thoughts?
How old is this one, you said? More or less?
It should be on the list, I think.
10 years old.
10 years old.
So it'll function as an understory tree then?
Yeah, it's real. In the wild, it's an understory tree. In the landscape, you can grow it under high shade, or you can put it out in the open like this. My experience with it in shade is it'll tend to shoot up, go very vertical pretty quickly, and then take more time filling out. Where in the shade you get more branching when it's young. So. No, we haven't had issues with it seeding. The other thing, whenever you say euonymus to me, I think euonymus scale is going to get scale, and I've never seen it on this plant, which isn't to say it doesn't get it, but we do have euonymus scale in other spots in the arboretum, so we've been pretty happy with how this has performed in that respect. Other questions or thoughts? Has anybody grown this from us or from anywhere else? Got a couple people. How's it doing?
Very good. Deer enjoy it, unfortunately.
Why so?
It just dropped all its leaves this summer and then got real crappy looking and then regrew some leaves, but it doesn't look very happy.
Oh, no, that's something I haven't experienced before. That's interesting. Not sure why it would do that. Any other questions or thoughts?
Is Hearts of Buston euonymus?
Yes. Yeah.
Mine's done fabulous.
Yeah, they're great plants. Yeah, you got plants to fit every niche, from ground covers, small shrubs, natives, exotics. If you want to give it time, there are even some that become big shade trees. I've seen some euonymus that are 60 feet tall. You got 100 years. Be in good shape. All right, we're going to move on. Okay, the next one is going to be in the scree garden. So I'll point out which one it is, then we may have to move out into the turf or somewhere to really be able to talk about all that. All right. So this plant is a little cestrum. A lot of people have grown cestrum as a house plant or in a cool tropical conservatory, that sort of thing. They're really nice plants. There are very few that are pretty reliable for us out here. We've been growing a orangey flowered one, a Cestrum parkii, and one of its selections, orange peel, for quite a while. But these purple flowered ones like Nuellii, elegans are a little bit tougher to grow for us. So when we got this plant we saw this growing at Pamela Harper's garden up in Virginia, and she's a fantastic gardener, and she thought it would do for us here in Raleigh. So we got some cuttings and brought it back. And we've had it in the ground for a couple of years now. I think since 2011, 2012, something like that. And it's kind of sat there, hasn't done a whole lot. And then all of a sudden this year, it really started growing into its own and getting this great flower set. Now, with the mature plant, it'll kind of flower off and on a little bit over the summer, but in the fall, when the days get shorter, is when it really starts flowering heavily. Typically, they're pretty fragrant. I wasn't getting a whole lot of fragrance on this, but I don't have a very good sense of smell. Cestrums, I won't swear to this, but my assumption is they're probably not well loved by deer. I won't say they won't eat them, but my assumption they've got a they've got fairly strong odor in the foliage, and they've got some I know they've got some compounds in the leaves that keep a lot of the insects off. So my guess is the deer as well. If we get a very, very cold winter and you have this out in a very, very open spot, I imagine you may lose it. It's probably a 7B plant fairly reliably, but you get down to the colder parts of Zone 7, I think you might have some problems. It's a compact form. Pamela Harper's was maybe 4 feet tall, and she had been growing it for a while, so it's going to stay nice and tight. Really good size for a shrub. We've just been tickled with the plant now that it's really kind of started going. Questions?
So can you get it anywhere?
Can you get it anywhere? We offer it sometimes. Not easily. Not easily. Oh, good question. Question was, does it need this really good drainage that we have out here? And it's definitely wants a well-drained soil. It probably doesn't need, this scree type soil, grow in average garden soils, but if you get it in clay, and most cestrum will grow in clay, and I imagine this one will, you're going to decrease the winter hardiness because they don't like that winter wet, and that's going to be the key. So having that good drainage. So if you don't have, a scree garden, but you have a slope, that would be a good spot for it, a sunny slope. It does want full sun though. It's not going to want a shady spot.
I know you know not to back up. That's
Yes.
what really scares me. Where are these native and what family are they in?
Cestrum are Solanaceae. They're native to South America, for the most part, Mexico down into South America.
This one obviously survived the cold that we experienced last winter, which was pretty unseasonable.
Yeah, it went down to about 7.5 degrees. Charlie, do you remember this? Did it die back to the ground?
I think it looked pretty wretched.
Yeah. It was. It took a beating for sure. And a lot of cestrum, once you get them established, they're almost better as cutback shrubs. The Parkii type can get kind of big and lanky, and they get beat up over the winters when they're cold. So if you cut them back pretty hard and just let them resprout every spring, they're pretty good. I usually let them go for a couple of years and then start doing that. This one you don't really need to cut back, but if it gets beat bad, it'll resprout. Other questions or thoughts? Okay. Now we're gonna walk by. I'm gonna go ahead and go under the trellis over there because I don't know how much because it's kind of tight over here. But as we're going by, look at behind you there. We've got some pinks and red flowers. We've got some more magenta here, and as we go by on your left, there'll be some nice kind of lavender and pink flowers. That's going to be the next plant we talk about. But I'm going to move on past that so we can gather around a little easier. All right, before I talk about the Salvia Greggii, I meant to mention when we first came out, every time we go through here, I need to talk about the pathways because that's always, people want to know about the product. It's a product that we're using and going to be using a lot more called Clingstone with a K, Clingstone Paths. You can go to their website and go on YouTube and see videos how to put it down. It's an epoxy that you put down as a liquid. A polymer that you put down as liquid, and it basically binds up into a solid, an inert solid. Has basically no doesn't leach anything into the soils. It's really nice product. So when you put it down, it kind of forms these little columns of this polymer that block the pipe, but it still leaves pore space for water to move through. So it's a porous path. So we really like that. It allows the water to infiltrate in. It's not a cheap product, but when you compare it to, say, landscape pavers and you look at installation costs, material costs, it actually winds up being very inexpensive because all you need to do is dig out, put yourself a good layer of washed stone, like 57 stone and angular stone, top it with an inch or so of whatever you want your top stone to be, and then put this material down, and it takes almost no time to put down. Super easy. Anybody can do it at all. Whereas pavers, you need some skill to really do a good job with pavers. So we really like it. It's according to the company, they say a 10-year lifespan, but they also say that they've been using it for almost 20 years without any issues. So it's a really neat product. Clingstone with a K. With a K. Yep. Any questions about that before we talk about plants? We've got some in our lath house as well, and it's been real popular. Okay, so the next plant, the ones we walked by, that's Salvia Greggii, or in some cases some of the hybrids with Salvia microphylla. Salvia Greggii is called autumn sage, and you can see why. It's really at its peak right now, although it starts flowering pretty early in the spring. Flowers on and off all summer, and then really kind of finishes out the season with a big show. So it's really kind of all season sage instead of autumn sage. It's a nice little kind of woody based perennial or subshrub, a low shrub, kind of loose and open a little bit, but it stays more or less evergreen unless we get a really cold winter. People often have trouble kind of caring for it because it does flower all season long. You never want to cut it back really hard unless you do that from the first time you plant it. You always keep it cut back. Once it gets those really woody stems, it doesn't like to be cut back hard. So the best way to deal with it, if you let it grow, if you want kind of a shrubby plant, is after that first spring flush of flowers, when you get a really good show, it'll keep flowering, but it'll be a little thinner, is go ahead and give it a little haircut then, trim it back a little bit. That'll encourage it to branch, get a little denser, and then it'll start flowering again a few weeks later and keep kind of spitting out flowers through the summer, and then fall you get a really nice show. You can cut it back after the fall show of flowers, but I tend to not like to cut sages back in the winter. They tend to be a little bit more susceptible to winter rot, it seems like, when I cut them back. Not really a problem in the scree here where we have excellent drainage, but if you have it in just a typical rich garden soil, you may want to just wait until after that spring flush flowers. You can trim off the old seed heads on it. That's fine. Super easy as long as you give it sun and relatively well-drained soil. Gives you a really long season of show. Colors for everything from pretty nice creamy whites to pastel pinks and now pastel lavenders and some yellowy colors to really vivid purples and magentas and pinks and reds. So kind of runs the gamut from kind of any kind of color you want, pretty much. Questions about Salvia Greggii?
You've got it in a pot. Is it liable to last the winter in a pot?
In a pot, it's going to be a little bit more susceptible to the cold. If we get a really cold winter like last year, you probably, good chance you'll lose it. If we have a relatively mild winter like we've had for most of the winters before that, should be fine. One of the issues with a plant like Salvia Greggii in a container is if it's in a spot that's really sunny, and it wants sun, and that pot heats up a lot, and then we're getting cold temperatures at night. They don't even have to be really low, way below freezing type of temperatures. You can run into some problems with that real extreme heat fluctuation with the pots and the soils. So it's almost better during the winter to kind of move it into a spot where it gets a little less sun, so that the pot more than the plant doesn't heat up so much. Better keeping it cold than it really heating too much up during the day.
I've had a couple of these for a couple of years, and while they are alive, they're spindly. They're a tenth of the size, that. I added a lot of pine bark soil conditioner to my clay for the drainage. Does it need to be like in a scree bed, or?
No, the question is, plants have been in the ground for several years and not really performing that great. Are they in full sun?
Yeah.
That's generally, if you've added some soil conditioner in and you have a well-drained soil, that's generally enough. If you've got it really conditioned down 8 or 10 inches,
It's also a little bit on. It's also on slope. Both of them are on a slope.
yeah, that should be fine. They do like rich soils, but if you've got it mixed in with the soil conditioner in with the clay, it should have plenty of nutrients. So I'm not sure what would cause that.
I've never fertilized them. I mean, I put compost in when I first planted it, and that was it.
That really should be fine. You may want to try fertilizing them lightly in the spring, but I would say next spring when they come out, after they flower, give it a little bit of a haircut because pruning does encourage growth.
Okay.
Mine that were close to the blueberries didn't do very well. That's where I had put some lime in the soil.
Yeah, that good point. Marilyn made the point that where she put some lime in the soil, they did better. And they are plants that are growing in dry conditions in the Southwest, and you do tend to have higher pH soils there. So it's a good point that lime may fix your problem, because between the pine bark and our native soils, you could have a almost 4 pH in there, and so.
I got a small one here, and it's kind of leaning over and starting to split a little bit. Does it hurt to bury that part in soil? Or?
Yeah, you wouldn't want to bury that part in the soil. No.
You don't want to cut it off?
If you're cutting off way down towards the base, they don't break really well if you cut back too hard. So I'd just trim it back, and that'll encourage some other growth to come out, and it should be okay.
Now, do these need full sun?
Full sun, yes.
These plants are happy enough here that we get seedlings out there.
Yeah.
You get some interesting colors.
Yeah. The point made that these plants we do get some seedlings, and you can get some really interesting colors. There is a lot of plants we grow in the garden. There's very little genetic diversity, and so seedlings tend to be exactly like their parents. The Greggii, they've been a lot of what you're growing with the different colors have some other things mixed in a little bit, and if you're growing several of them like us, with those seedlings you can get a real wide range of colors. They will tend towards kind of mid-range pinks, but sometimes you can get some really really exciting different colors out of those. They're fun to grow from seed because you do get a lot of different things. One of my new favorite plants. Been really impressed with this plant the last couple years. This is one of the Japanese aster. Izo Murasaki is the cultivar name. Izo is a region in Japan. Murasaki means purple, so you kind of pick up where that name comes from. This is a really reliable fall blooming aster, vigorous spreader. You can see, I can't remember what was the date that it was planted.
2011.
2011. This was from a quart pot, so it's a vigorous spreader, not for the faint of heart. But if you have a spot that's in the sun that needs some, needs some coverage, this is a great plant. Comes up, looks real tidy all summer long, kind of upright, and nice deep green masses of foliage. And then in October, it really starts going. September, you'll start seeing these little purple buds, and you say, "Oh, that's nice." And then by about mid-October, it is just absolutely covered in flowers. Keeps going on through much of November. Really, really frost-tolerant flowers. We could get a heavy frost. Doesn't bother this a bit. Doesn't need a whole lot except for a relatively kind of a loose soil and full sun. In heavier soils, it's going to be a little bit slower spreading. So, put it straight into your red clay, and you may, you may get half this size in 3 years rather than, a 15-foot spread. But there aren't a lot of plants that really do this for you, that can take up some space and really look good most of the season. We'll cut it back down after it finishes flowering and the foliage starts to yellow. We'll cut it back to the ground, and you'll get some rosettes over the winter, but it won't be a whole mass of foliage on the ground. So it is pretty much gone for the winter. But definitely a nice plant for kind of a sunny spot that you want to ignore. It will outcompete the weeds. It makes a really nice tight mat. It is available for sale several places. It's starting to become more and more popular. I've seen it in the nursery trade. We often are selling it because we have lots of plants to divide. We can share with everybody. We do warn people that it does spread vigorously, but yeah, you can mind that.
There's a white form, but it seems taller. Is that right?
There is a white form. It's not. It may be a little bit taller. It depends on where you grow it. If you grow this in, the more shade you grow this, the taller it'll get. And even right here, you can see where it gets a little more shade. It's a little leggier. It doesn't keep flowering quite as well. So a lot of times the white we have here is growing a little more shade and certainly a little bit taller and stretched and not spreading quite as quickly. The more sun you give them, the happier they'll be.
Bee resistance? Any idea?
I have no idea.
Anyone?
Anyone? They'll eat asters. This one may outdo them. They get going fast enough. If they munch on it early in the season, it's no big deal because that'll just get it to branch more. It'll be a little lower growing, but and then you won't get the flowers until maybe a little later.
Is it like lobelia that you have to keep the leaves off the rosettes in the wintertime?
No, this hasn't seemed to be a real problem. Now, you wouldn't want 3 feet of leaves. The question was about keeping leaves off the rosettes in the winter. You actually get relatively few rosettes. You don't get it like you didn't like a whole mass of rosettes. So, and it's rhizomatous. Most of this is coming from underground, so shouldn't be a problem.
Is it better to cut it back like early to midsummer just to encourage more branching?
Probably wouldn't hurt. Is it better to cut it back midway through the summer, kind of like you do with Joe Pye weed and things like that? I think you'd probably be better off. You can see some of these stems, they're pretty tall with the flowers on top. If you had cut that back, you'd encourage branching. Probably don't want to cut back much later than mid-July or so, but you'll get twice as many branches. They'll still probably have just as many flowers on there, and So you get even better show, and you'll have less of the flopping that we got here. Okay. So we have Diosporus rhombifolia suisse, which doesn't really, I don't know, suisse, the main definition has something to do with water. I'm not quite sure where that comes from with this, but in recent years going to Japan, they have really started getting, doing a lot of these smaller persimmons. Diosporus rhombifolia, which is called the diamond leaf persimmon, and you can see the leaf kind of has a bit of a diamond shape, maybe, like many other leaves. But it's a small plant, doesn't grow very large. Usually, an older plant could be 8 or 10 feet tall, but often they're more in the 4 to 6 foot range. In general, rhombifolia will often sucker. You can get kind of a mass of stems. The Japanese usually keep those cleared out and often grow them in containers and just have a single plant that they kind of control the growth of, bonsai it a little bit, that sort of thing. They've got quite a few different named ones. They grow just dozens and dozens of unnamed seedling ones that are different. This one, Suisse, if you look at the fruit closely, it's kind of a spindle-shaped fruit, and with some maturity, they can get even longer. They'll grow to about an inch and a quarter long, and only about maybe a half an inch wide. It's a really nice orangey red with black speckles all over. Now, some are round, some are longer shaped, some are kind of squat. Most of them are pure orangey red, but these ones with black spots are kind of prized. And there's also ones that are almost entirely black with some orange speckles on them as well. So a lot of different forms of these persimmons that are grown there. They also grow Diosporus catheensis, another shrubby persimmon, in kind of the same way, but there aren't so many selections of that one yet. There will be, I'm sure. Pretty easy, really. We're planted in pretty deep shade here. Really prefer quite a bit more sun. This hadn't been here that long, so it'll be interesting to watch it and see in this much shade if it continues to fruit really well. I'm not entirely certain that it will. So if it doesn't, we'll probably wind up moving it out to a bit of a sunnier spot. But it'll grow fine in shady soils like this. We'll have a little bit more tendency to sucker in shadier soils, and in real heavy soils, it'll sucker a little bit. Otherwise, pretty easy. Cut out the suckers or let it grow into a mass. Kind of a more elegant plant if you keep those suckers cut out. Is the fruit edible? It is a persimmon, and I'm sure it is edible, but there is very, very little fruit in there. It's mostly seed. Pretty hard, probably not very good, but it won't hurt you if you do.
Does it attract deer?
Does it attract deer?
Do they like it?
I don't know. I'm sure they would eat it if they come through. I don't know if it would actually attract them, but it wouldn't repel them for sure.
I can tell you dogs like persimmons.
Dogs like
dogs.
persimmons. Like mulberries too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is at the right height for deer to come get the fruit, but there isn't a whole lot on there.
That's fine.
Any other questions or thoughts? All right. Start looking at these. We brought several back that we've distributed to some nurserymen, so hopefully we'll some of these will show up in the trade before too long. We don't have a specific amount. We add permatil to just about every bed we do now. Helps with drainage, helps with soil compaction, helps with moisture retention. Ideally, we do about 25% addition to our beds. Don't always do that. It kind of depends on what we have on hand.
Yeah, you use a lot of soil conditioner in your bed mixes.
We use a lot of permatil, the stone. We use Novozymes compost, which is sold as green relief compost. We use those are basically the only things we use in the soil. Not because we have anything against soil conditioners or anything like that, but for long-term keeping soils from compacting, the Permatil does a much better job because it's stone.
You have vole problems? Is that helping with it?
We don't really have vole problems, so the Permatil is going to help keep us from having vole problems where we put it in, but we don't currently have vole problems. Hey, hard to do a talk about November in the garden without talking about camellias if you're in the South. The Sasanquas and the Vernalis, the camellias you often get flowering now, the Sasanquas especially. This one, Hiryu, it's an old Japanese form. I'm not sure when it was first introduced, but a long time ago. That's you can find kicking around gardens fairly often, not all the time, and it's one of my favorites. It makes a nice evergreen shrub. We had some large plants here, and so this is just getting some space to really grow in well. And it'll if it were grown without so much competition, it'd be a little denser than it currently is. But what I really like about it are these really nice kind of semi-double flowers that are kind of rosy pink but with a blue tinge to them. They've kind of got like a little bit of blue purple around the edge of the leaf. Very unusual for camellia in terms of this flower color. It's a heavy bloomer, and what's nice about Hiryu, unlike some of the other camellias, is it'll flower over a really extended period. If you look on here carefully, you'll see really tight, small flower buds that haven't even thought about swelling yet. They are just as tight as can be. Those won't be showing any color for another, probably another month or so. So really, you get almost 6 weeks of flower color out of Hiryu, which is a little unusual for a lot of camellias. Like most camellias, they grow and flower well in some shade. They'll grow in full sun just fine. You'll tend to have your leaves won't be quite so dark green in full sun. You'll tend to have kind of a yellowy green foliage on there in full sun, but they'll grow and flower quite well. This one is available at nurseries pretty easily. So if you like that color, it's pretty easy to come by. Unlike the euonymus, which is difficult to get. Questions about this? Other camellias?
It's really only 10 years old.
That's what I was wondering.
Oh yeah.
That's amazing.
Really? Wow.
What size do y'all usually?
This is 1 gallon.
This was a 1 gallon. We plant, half the stuff we plant in little 3.5-inch pots that we always distribute plants in. If you have decent soil, plants will grow. Plants go quick. Any other questions?
You fertilize much?
Never. I won't say never. Ideally, we fertilize with a slow release or just with a 10-10-10 the first 2 years it's in the ground. In reality, we almost never do that just because fertilizer costs money and we have limited budgets. But we do have, our native soils, red clay. People complain about that, but that stuff is nothing but nutrient rich. I mean, that is fantastic soil. And if you amend with something to loosen it up and improve the drainage, like Permatil or compost, any kind of organic matter, you've got phenomenal soils here in the
You got your leaf mulch here.
Yeah, we put down, you see the leaf mulch, we put down leaf mulch, at least once a year everywhere in the garden, sometimes twice a year in some high profile areas. This is a pretty high profile area, so it usually gets mulched twice a year. And that leaf mulch breaks down and creates a really nice humus layer in there that's really good for the plants. And camellias like that acid soil that we have here, so.
They probably get taller with more sun, right?
They actually, more sun they get, the tighter they'll be. In shade, these and a lot of other plants will tend to stretch. And really that's what's happened. That's why it's not dense in here, because it had been really shaded before and had a not just high shade, but pretty low dense shade. Yeah, you can
Meredith?
see. You see, we're on the pathway. There are several stumps through
Okay.
here. So, yeah, it was pretty bad. Let's talk about the Diosporus rhombifolia. This is another persimmon, Diosporus khaki. This is, if you go to the grocery store and you get those great big persimmons, the Japanese persimmons, that's what this comes from, Diosporus khaki. Ours was a little bit stressed, so we didn't get fruit this year. We had some problems with some borers, so it was a little stressed. But usually most years we'll get nice fruit from here that's perfectly edible, delicious fruit. But even without fruit, I think it's a really attractive tree. Kind of an open, irregularly shaped tree. It was another one that had some competition, so it's kind of leaning. Typically, if it didn't have that kind of competition, it'd be a little more upright. But Diosporus khaki gets these great big leaves and screaming fall color, just deep burgundies, bright oranges, kind of that color profile, bright red, so really spectacular fall color. And since it's got big leaves and not a whole lot of them, they're easy to clean up once they fall. With some age, you'll get really nice bark. If you know our native persimmon, it's got that beautiful kind of alligator skin blocky bark that's so attractive. This will get that to a lesser extent, but really, if grown in more sun, it can be a really heavy fruit producer. That's persimmons are fantastic. If you don't eat Asian persimmons, you should be eating them because they're great fall fruits. Doesn't need a whole lot. Produce more in full sun. Typical garden soil. If you do a little selective pruning, sometimes you do get on these plants, you'll get these vertical suckers. You want to take those out. They won't produce for you, and they'll kind of look ugly on there as well. But otherwise, pretty low care, and they're small. Our native persimmons are great big trees, and they can be pretty difficult to fit into a landscape. But Diosporus khaki is pretty small size. You're looking at 15 to 20 feet tall generally, so they fit into most landscapes. There are a lot of named varieties. This is just the straight species, but there's a ton of named varieties available in the trade. I'd suggest you get a named variety that's for fruit production, just because you're going to get a higher quality fruit. This one actually has decent fruit, but you don't know what you'll get. You want ones with small or no seed in there. There are some selections with no seed at all, where you get a fruit like this. I think apple size with no fruit, no seed at all in it. So it's pretty nice things. There are some forms with kind of spindle-shaped fruit, like on the rhombifolia. There's a weeping form that always has those spindle-shaped fruits. They're not great for eating, but they're okay. Deer probably love this, so before anybody asks, I'm sure that deer will eat the fruit on this.
But you don't have to have two of it.
You don't. Do you have to have two? You don't have to have two to produce fruit. No, it helps. Like with most fruits, it helps to have two different varieties that are cross-pollinating. But you can get fruit. If you get a fruiting selection, most of those have male flowers. Persimmons are, in what you'll see in most things is that they're dioecious, separate male and female plants. In reality, they tend to be more andromonoecious or gynomonoecious, meaning they'll have mostly male flowers and some female flowers, or mostly female flowers and some male flowers. So many of the fruiting varieties, and most good nurseries will be able to tell you if they're self-fruitful. Those are ones that have mostly female flowers and some male flowers. And I don't know, we have a big persimmon right around the corner, a native one. I don't know if they cross-pollinate or not. That could help produce fruit, but I don't know that for sure. Other questions?
How much sun does it have to have?
Well, ours produced fruit, and this was a big cedar right here. It did not have much sunlight at all, and it had the other trees that we just walked through over the stumps over here. So it really was not getting a lot of sun, and it produced okay, not great, but it did produce okay. The more sun it has, the better it's going to be. It's not going to produce in heavy shade. Maybe 2 or 3 fruits, but that's it. All right, next one on the list, we can go without even moving. It's this wonderful maple right here. People will tell you can't grow sugar maples in this area, that they don't do well. Some do pretty good. This is one called Flax Mill Majesty. It's been the best sugar maple I've ever seen. I've grown it a couple of places, and it always seems to perform very well. Not very quick grower is my experience in the southeast, but that's kind of nice because sugar maples can get awfully big. It's one that was selected in New York State. So it's not southern provenance, which is what a lot of people are looking for southern sugar maples. But it gets fantastic fall color every year, really does. And the heat and the humidity just don't seem to bother it at all. It don't have a lot of disease problems, the foliar problems, anything like that. So it's one that when people come to me, moved here from up north, and they ask about sugar maples, I'll tell them about some of our southern ones, like Acer leucodermi and Acer barbatum, our southern relatives of sugar maple. But if they've got to have a sugar maple, they want that real apricot color, this Flax Mill Majesty is the way to go. Sometimes takes some doing to track it down, but it is produced in the trade. Just nobody produces sugar maples in the South, so you gotta find it farther north. But definitely worth seeking out. And the reason we're getting good fall color all over the garden this year, fall color is really what you need for that is cool nights, which we've been getting some really nice cool nights, and clear days, sunny clear days. If you get a combination of those things, you really will get good fall color. Up north, they always have that. We don't always have those. We often don't have the cool nights, and often in the fall we don't have a lot of so many clear days. So this year we've been getting a lot of that. I've been gone all of October, but from what I understand, it was pretty clear that whole time. So that's why we're getting these good colors. But this guy will color up pretty reliably no matter what. Questions or thoughts?
Mark.
Yep.
The cedar, did that die, or was it just taking up too much space?
It died.
Is that the gold?
No, this was, and I can't even remember which one it was. And I'm not sure how it died. It was one of those things, this spring I was walking through, and there's a lot of times to be looking down and looking at weeds and things like that, and I looked up and there was a big dead tree. So I'm not sure what did it, but we're having some issues with this other one as well. So
What'd you do with it? Burn it?
No, I'm not sure. A lot of time, well, it may have been burnt. I just cut them down and get them out of here. I don't have a wood burning stove or anything, but we do have several people around here who have wood stoves and fireplaces. So usually somebody on staff, either here or the field lab behind, grabs hold of most of that stuff.
It's an aggressive spread in hell.
Well, we planted out a lot. We planted out, I don't know how many, quite a few trays of them. And then hellebore seed like crazy. So when you have this many planted together, they seed all over the place.
What variety is that?
This is just hybridus. I can't remember if this is the pink shades or white shades. We had just some seedlings that were separated out.
They're pink.
They're pink? Okay, this is the pink shades.
I mapped, so I know.
So, they'll stay pretty consistent. The seedlings should be pink since they're all coming from pink parents. But yeah, that's what we want them to do. Gotcha. Now, those of you who know me know I love my osmanthus. I always say I'm never going to move anywhere where you can't grow osmanthus. That's kind of the dividing line. If you can't grow osmanthus fragrans, it isn't worth living there. I'm sorry. This isn't osmanthus fragrans. This is osmanthus heterophilus purpureus. So purple-leafed holly tea olive. This is the last of the osmanthus to bloom for us in the fall, reliably. It always is the last one. This form purpureus. The osmanthus heterophilus. Heterophilus means different leaf. Hetero leaf. And these are plants where when they're young, you'll have a real spiny leaf that looks like a holly. And then with age, like this one, they'll tend to lose all their spines, sometimes have just a single spine at the tip, sometimes no spine at all, and you get more of a rounded leaf. So it kind of changes through the life of the plant. This particular form, purpureus, new growth emerges purple. Is really apparent and showy in young plants and plants that are pruned back, so it makes a great hedge. When it gets big like this, if you just let it grow, you get very little new growth. You're only getting a couple of inches of new growth at this point every year, and so you don't get that really deep purple that really shows up just because there isn't enough of it. So if it's hedged, you get this big flush of nice dark foliage first thing in the year. But still a nice plant. It has kind of a darker leaf all season long because of that. So still a nice plant. Really fragrant. Hopefully y'all can smell it. I can smell it right here. Terrible sense of smell, and I can smell it. So it's nice. And it'll be followed by little blue-black fruits that are that look like olives. That's why it gets the name tea olive or false olive. It is a member of the olive family, so these are very closely related to actual olives. I don't know if they taste like olives. How many people have eaten an olive off a tree? I had the pleasure of seeing somebody do that a couple of weeks ago. Which, have you ever had a persimmon right off a tree before a frost? Think about 20 times worse than that. It will turn your entire face inside out. It's so astringent. It's great. If somebody else is doing it.
Has that been there a long time?
Yeah, this has been here ages, and I don't think it's on the list because I think it predates some of our records. So it's been here for a long, long time. And you can see it would, naturally it would make just a big mound all the way down to the ground. We've lifted it up so we can start getting some plants underneath there, turn into more of a small tree. Which Osmanthus heterophilus is great as a small tree. You can grow it as a single trunk plant. It's not usually grown that way, but it really makes a beautiful, beautiful plant. You can grow them. You see that nice round head. You can grow them like people do with silver pears and things up in the north. If you want a really formal garden, they're really nice like that. Only slow getting there. Osmanthus heterophilus will grow. Full sun is best if you really want lots of flowers, you really want that big show. Nice dense plant. You can grow it in the shade. It'll take really very, very dense shade. Flowering's reduced. It'll be a little more open when it grows, but still it'll grow well in pretty deep shade. Questions? Yes?
What time of year would you prune it if you did want to do like a hedge?
Late winter, early spring,
so
before it starts growing is when I do it. And then you could do it again during midsummer.
Okay, so it sets the buds late summer then?
The flower buds, it sets it. If you finish pruning by early July, it hadn't set flower buds until August or so. Salvia puberula El Butano. This is one of the Mexican sages, much like Salvia gregii from the southeast in Mexico. This is quite a bit different than the Salvia gregii. This gets to be a pretty large plant. Once it's been in the ground for several years, you can, if it's in really sunny spot, nice soil, fertile but very well drained, it can get 6 feet tall or more. So you get these tall stems, kind of somewhat large, somewhat fuzzy leaves, and then in the fall, it forms, the late summer fall, forms these huge round buds, a little smaller than a golf ball, maybe like a big gumball size at the top of all these branches, which slowly unfurl to get these fuzzy pink tubular flowers. And you can see the buds still on the top. It'll continue putting out flowers. Now it flowers late in the season, and if you get an October frost, a mid-October frost, forget about it. This thing dies back to the ground, and you have grown this big leafy green thing all summer long and didn't get the payoff at the end. And that's the struggle with a lot of these late blooming herbaceous sages, is that you can miss out on the flowers. When you get the flowers, when the weather cooperates, they're really spectacular. My recommendation, if you're growing these, is to grow them kind of at the back of a sunny border, so you have other things in front of it. And if you lose those flowers, it's okay. You don't really miss it. Those years when it really flowers well, it kind of surprises you and really looks great in the border. And that also helps keep it standing up. If you have a really wet summer, they can flop pretty bad. It's another one that if you want to keep smaller, you can cut it back midway through the summer, let it branch. You'll often get more flowers, kind of more like this, that are a little smaller than some of these bigger flower clusters, but still real showy because you'll get a lot more of them.
Is it related to the large purple one that's in the butterfly garden?
Is it related to the large? Is that Salvia leucantha in there? I can't remember. Probably. It's related to it. They're in the same genus. You know, I don't know breakdown wise if it's how close it's related, but they're both salvias.
Is this herbaceous or weak wood or?
This is. The question is this herbaceous or weakly wooded? In zone 8, 7, it is completely herbaceous. It's going to die back to the ground. You start getting where you have warm, dry winters, it'll get a nice woody base and be get to be 8 or 10 feet tall, pretty large. Butterflies do love it. It is. I would say it's reliable in 7B. You know, you get in the colder parts of 7, and it's a little less reliable. I've had good experiences with them. I've had other people tell me that they lose these big pink fall blooming sages pretty regularly. So that may be a drainage issue. If you have wet soils, they're not going to like that during the winter at all. Anybody have experience? Have they lost these?
I lost mine
This last winter.
Yeah, but I had put some cuttings in the house, so I have it again. It looks about
there you
like
go.
that.
Yeah, they root easily. So if you have these things and you're a little worried about them, you root a couple and you're good because they'll grow pretty well. Had you had it for several years before this?
No, that was my first year.
First year. Cold winter, first year. Yeah, that can do it. We are not talking about this plant. This is a sage. This is another sage. We're talking about this little guy in front. This is a verbascum dark eyes. It's a mullein. If you think of the weed you see on the side of the road, those big silvery fuzzy leaves and rosettes, that's a mullein. That's a verbascum. So kind of the same thing. This is a new hybrid called dark eyes. It's very dwarf with multiple flower stalks. Usually this it's a verbascum Chexii type. Usually you get one stalk with flowers on there, so it doesn't last for a really long time. This one you get these multiple flowers, only grows to about 12 inches tall. We planted these in August, maybe late July, but I think it was August. They were flowering, this verbascum was flowering mid-August. I know that for a fact because we had an event out here and they were looking fantastic for it. They have not stopped flowering since mid-August. I don't know how early they'll start because we haven't had them in the ground long enough, but really nice. So, and then during the winter, those rosettes will stay there. You cut the leaves off, they'll look a little ragged over the winter, and then put out new foliage, and then midsummer or so, they'll start flowering again next year. So, really, a plant I've been quite impressed with. Verbascums tend to be very drought tolerant, so you can put them in. Once you've established them, they can do very well without any kind of supplemental watering in a really dry spot. Naturally, they grow in kind of rocky places, kind of in those rock crevices, so they have a tap root down there, so they can get down pretty deep and hold some moisture in that root like a storage room. We'll cut back the flowers, you know, once they stop flowering, another couple weeks or months, or whenever they stop. You know, they'll look kind of nice for the winter just like that, and then boom, right back up with new foliage in spring. Not going to be real happy in shade. This is one I had been asked about, you know, leaves on the foliage when you have these rosettes. This is one that's not going to be happy with, you know, all your maple leaves falling on top of it and sitting on top of it. It's going to rot it out most likely. So you do want to keep the fall leaves off of it. pH, great question. A lot of the verbascums like high pH, but most of these Chexii types are fine with high pH. The low pH is something we have here, so I don't think that's going to be an issue.
And they're perennials?
They're perennials, yeah.
Not biennial.
Pardon?
Not biennial.
These are not biennial. The verbascum Chexiis, for the most part, are perennials, and these definitely are. Yeah. They kind of, you may get some of the rosettes dying out after the flowering, but you get these side rosettes, so they'll actually multiply really nicely. This has got some down here. The ones that have really nice big kind of side rosettes, those are going to be great. That main one may die out, but they should be fine. I'm a big fan of beautyberries. It's one of those plants when I first started gardening, first started learning about plants, I stumbled across one in full fruit, one of our native ones, native to the southeast, and you know, it was one of those things where just couldn't believe that plants had colors like that, especially in the fruits. This is one that was bred by NC State's own Tom Ranney, Calicarpa Purple Pearls. It's a hybrid between Calicarpa bodnerii, which is one of the real popular Japanese beauty berries, real heavy fruiting form, kind of small fruit, really heavy fruiting, and Calicarpa quangtongensis, which typically has small fruit, although we've got a large fruited one as well, but is really known for its fantastic foliage, and the foliage is nice and long and narrow. Some of the Calicarpa foliage, like our native one, is pretty ugly, really. But the quangtongensis always has this kind of purple vein down the center, very distinctive leaf. If you were just to show me this without any fruit on this, I would tell you this is Calicarpa quangtongensis, no doubt, because it's got this really nice foliage to it, a little bit of a purpley tinge to it, very distinct. But this is a hybrid, so you get that nice foliage, you get the kind of the upright form of Calicarpa quangtongensis, but then this hybrid's got these really nice large fruit, really good color on the fruit, and the more sun you get, the brighter the fruit will be. Doesn't have quite that metallic sheen that the native Calicarpa americana does, or Calicarpa japonica, but still really nice. One of the largest fruits, individual fruits of any beauty berry. Calicarpa's real easy. You grow them in full sun for the heaviest flowering, heaviest fruiting, but they'll tolerate quite a bit of shade. In shade, you'll tend to have less flower, less fruit, but still very nice. And that's one nice thing about this quangtongensis is you'll get really nice foliage even if you're not getting super heavy fruiting on there. When they're in flower during the summer, the butterflies, will come around. The butterflies do like it. Little lavender flowers in clusters. Really attractive plant. Questions? Yeah.
Seed all over the place?
Does it seed all over the place? We haven't had this one long enough to know, I couldn't answer that for you. I know people have had real issues with Calicarpa seeding around. I've never had, I've grown a lot of Calicarpas, and I've never had more than a handful of seedlings around. It's not been an issue for me, but I have seen places where it is an issue. This being a hybrid, I don't even know. I haven't tried growing out any of the seeds, so I don't know. It may be sterile. Sometimes the hybrids you get sterile the sterile fruit. So, but I don't know about that. Sometimes you get extra vigor. Definitely has a lot of vigor in the plant, but I can't answer.
Fall color on the leaves?
Fall color on the leaves. You get a little bit of this kind of burgundy tint, but we haven't had this this one we haven't had in the ground long. So I don't know if we're going to get much more than that in terms of fall color. You don't typically grow Calicarpas for great fall color. Every once in a while, you get some pretty nice burgundies and or yellows on them, but
I get great yellows on mine.
yeah.
That's why I asked.
Will it drop the leaves and retain the berries, or?
Yeah, it will, and I'm interested to watch this over the years. I've grown a lot of beauty berries, and my experience is you watch the birds will come through and they'll eat the purple fruited American beauty berries, and then they'll eat the purple fruited most of the Asian ones that have larger fruits like japonica and dichotoma and bodnerii, and then they'll eat the white fruited American beauty berries, and then the white fruited Japanese beauty berries. They never touch the Mexican beauty berries at all. This, I would imagine, this is one that will probably be hit after the American ones are hit, but they should still have fruit after the leaves fall. So you should get that much anyway. last one is Acer conspicuum red flamingo. This is one of the snake bark maples. The snake bark maples don't always do so well for us in high heat and humidity. So I want to get this on a tour before it gets canker and dies. Now who knows? Maybe this will be one of the good ones. The conspicuums don't always do really well for us, but red flamingo is a variegated maple. Comes out really almost, the new growth is almost completely pink in the spring. Then it goes to green with the white splotching on there. Some pink on there, but really doesn't start picking the pink up again until heavily until the fall. You can see how the new growth is almost entirely pink. So it kind of keeps flushing out over the season. Nice large leaves, long petioles, really shows that foliage off well. And then the winter stems are really nice bright red, especially on the younger stems. If you're in a place where they grow really well, like the West Coast, you know, you can cut them back a little bit and kind of keep them hedged back almost, and to really show off that new growth in those stems if you want. If you let it grow, since it is a snake bark, you get the white striations through the stem, which are really nice. Now, most of the snake barks will really show that best, and that includes our native northeastern ones like Acer spicatum, the moose wood. That's one of these snake bark maples. They'll really show the white striations in the bark best if you give them a little bit of lime. So if you just dump about a half a cup of lime around the base every year, you can get these really bright red stems on this, or bright green on some of the other ones with those white lines through it. Like I said, this is not the best environment for some of these, like these conspicuum type maples. But if you're going to try and grow them, you do it like this, where they get some shade, get a little bit of sun. You know, the sun during the summer kind of comes up over this way and heads over that way. It gets a fair amount of shade from this plant and this hedge, but gets enough light during the afternoon to really grow. The other thing is they tend to be really floppy when young. Many of these snake bark maples are really awkward adolescent trees. Weren't we all? So they do need some staking, they do need some growing, and then they'll really, eventually they can grow into very nice trees. But as young, they kind of flop around, and they'll put long, you know, they'll have like one branch that comes way arching out that you really gotta trim back and head back, and you gotta work with these to get a nice plant. If you don't, it will never be a nice looking plant. So they do require a little bit extra care getting them going. Questions? All right. Once I say that it's going to die here, no, everybody's going to die, right? All right. Well, that's just a little bit out here. There's a lot going on.
What's that plant right below it?
Okay. Yeah. This was almost on the list. This is an Alstroemeria. This was a selection that came out probably close to 20 years ago. Still a great plant. Makes a nice clump. Flowers over extended period. You can see it's flowering most of the late summer into fall really well. There's other Alstroemerias that we can grow, like the Citacina, the Aztec flower, which spreads rampantly, can become a real problem. But this stays just a nice tight clump and flowers and flowers and flowers. Beautiful plant.
Which selection is that?
Was this Freedom?
Liberty? Freedom?
Yeah, Freedom. There's Sweet Laura, maybe finished up. There's a Sweet Laura, right there. That's a yellow one, kind of gold flowers, but that same kind of flecking in there.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep. Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you all for coming out. Hopefully we'll see you again.